Welcome to District Command Central, your go-to source for the latest news and updates on the Washington Commanders. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, so you never miss a play. The Washington Commanders find themselves navigating yet another turbulent chapter in what has already been a chaotic and emotionally draining season. Sitting at 3-8 after a disheartening loss to the Miami Dolphins, the franchise enters the bye week with more questions than answers, more uncertainty than optimism, and more pressure on its newly established leadership group than at any other point since the season kicked off, with 6 games still left on the schedule. Many fans have already mentally shifted their focus toward the offseason, toward the big decisions that loom over this franchise like storm clouds waiting to burst, and toward what could easily become a defining moment in the tenure of General Manager Adam Peters. It's a crossroads moment, one that has the potential to reshape the Commanders for years to come. For better or for worse, this roster is not just flawed. It's full of holes that have been exposed week after week by opponents, who seem to have no trouble exploiting every single weakness. Whether it's offensive inconsistency, defensive breakdowns, or the lack of depth across almost every position group, Washington has been forced to confront a harsh reality. A large number of veteran starters are hitting free agency, many of whom are either declining in performance or simply no longer fit the long-term direction of the team. There is a glaring need, not a mild suggestion, not a simple preference, but a glaring necessity to get younger, faster, and more athletic, and with nearly $100 million in projected cap space. The front office is staring at a rare opportunity to overhaul the roster, but also a dangerous financial balancing act that requires precision, restraint, and vision. Miss on these off-season moves, and the franchise could slide further into mediocrity. Hit on them, and the rebuild under Peters suddenly develops real traction. Even more complicated is the draft situation right now. Peters is walking into the 2026 NFL Draft holding just 6 picks, after choosing not to sell off more pieces at the trade deadline. 6 picks for a roster this depleted is like trying to rebuild a house with only half the tools you need. It's possible, but it forces creativity, it forces tough choices, and most importantly, it intensifies the importance of that first-round pick, which, given the current standings, could easily land inside the top 10. That slot gives Washington a golden opportunity to acquire a blue-chip prospect or trade back to collect additional selections. It's the kind of decision that can define an era, the kind that either accelerates a rebuild or stalls it before it has even begun. For Peters, the calculus becomes even more complicated when you examine the positional needs Washington must address its defense. There's no debating that the unit has been aging rapidly, playing inconsistently, and lacking the playmaking spark you expect from a defense with its level of investment. Even before the Jaden Daniels injury took the wind out of the team's sails, the defense had already been a season-long concern. And when analysts look at the upcoming draft class, it is clear that this is a particularly strong year for defensive prospects, especially in the secondary. That's where Ohio State safety Caleb Downs enters the conversation. And he enters with force. Cody Williams of Fansided recently projected that the Commanders would use their top 10 pick, currently slotted at 7th overall, to draft Downs. And if you watch the young star's tape, it's easy to understand why. Downs is a ball hawk, a chess piece, a defensive weapon who can move all over the field and instantly raise the football IQ and versatility of any secondary he joins. Williams pointed out the exact qualities that Washington desperately needs right now: playmaking, range, instincts, and the ability to transform a unit that has been sorely lacking energy and identity. Downs is not just another safety prospect. He's the kind of player who can become the centerpiece of an entire defensive rebuild. The type of talent who forces offenses to adjust their game plan just by being on the field. And sure, some critics will argue that drafting a safety inside the top 10 carries questionable positional value. But that argument starts to unravel when you consider what Downs can actually offer. He isn't simply a box safety or a deep coverage specialist. He's a hybrid defender with the potential to play multiple roles. A modern-era safety built for a league that is becoming more positionless every season. His instincts alone make him special, but it's his ability to diagnose plays before they develop in closed space instantly that truly separates him from the pack. In the right environment, Downs has the chance to become one of the most impactful defenders in the league. The Commanders need that kind of presence, because their secondary is collapsing under the weight of unmet expectations and failed breakouts. Quan Martin, who was hyped to take a significant leap this season, has not lived up to the promise. His breakout campaign hasn't just stalled, it never got off the ground. Jeremy Reeves, Percy Butler, and Tyler Owens have shown flashes at times, but they profile more as depth pieces and special team contributors than as long-term starters. Will Harris may return, but his presence alone isn't nearly enough to stabilize the unit. Washington needs difference makers. It needs players who can dictate matchups, force turnovers, and bring leadership to a back end that currently feels like it's surviving on borrowed time. And that leads to the uncomfortable reality: drafting Caleb Downs would place Quan Martin squarely on the chopping block, not because Martin lacks potential, not because he has no role on a future roster, but because the NFL is ruthless. It's a league where production matters more than projections, where timelines don't wait for players to develop. Martin is entering the final year of his rookie contract, and if the Commanders invest a premium pick in Downs, the writing on the wall becomes clear. His role would shrink, his opportunities would dry up, and his future in Washington would become uncertain at best. For a player who arrived with so much excitement, the fall from projected breakout star to expendable depth piece would be a harsh turn of events, but this is the nature of the rebuild the Commanders are entering. Change is coming, change is inevitable, but the form that change takes remains the great unknown. Drafting Downs could be the spark that reignites a lifeless defense, the kind of bold move that signals the beginning of a new era for Washington, yet that same decision could simultaneously accelerate the departure of players who were once part of the long-term vision. It's a delicate balance, one that Peters must navigate with precision, conviction, and a little bit of courage. The Commanders' offseason is shaping up to be one of the most pivotal in recent memory. Every move will be scrutinized, every pick will carry weight, and every decision will shape the identity of a franchise searching desperately for stability and direction. Whether Downs becomes the cornerstone of that new identity remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: if Washington pulls the trigger, the ripple effects will be immediate. And Quan Martin, once seen as a future star, may find himself fighting for his place in a rapidly changing landscape. If you're enjoying the coverage, make sure to smash that like button and drop a comment with your thoughts on the Commanders' latest moves. We want to hear from you. The whispers started almost immediately after the final whistle, but by now, they've turned into a roar. Terry McLaurin, the ever-elusive, endlessly underrated wide receiver, has reportedly delivered what some are already calling an epic lesson to the Miami Dolphins. A moment that could echo through the league for weeks, maybe even months. There's a palpable energy building around this, and fans, analysts, and casual observers alike are trying to unpack exactly what went down. Some are framing it as a textbook performance, others as a personal statement, and a few, those with a taste for the dramatic, are even calling it a humiliation of the Dolphins, albeit in the most sporting sense imaginable. But the point that refuses to be ignored is simple. McLaurin reminded everyone why he's considered one of the most intelligent, skilled, and lethal receivers in the game today. From the early stages of the contest, there was a subtle tension in the air, a kind of electric curiosity about whether McLaurin could seize the moment and bend it entirely to his will. Every snap, every route he ran seemed purposeful, almost deliberate in its cruelty to defensive schemes that had perhaps underestimated him. Rumors around the locker room suggest that McLaurin had been particularly focused this week, obsessing over film and exploiting minor weaknesses in the Dolphins' coverage that no one else had thought to touch. There's talk that the Dolphins' defensive coordinator spent the week crafting complex coverage plans, anticipating his speed, his agility, his uncanny knack for reading the field, but somehow, every plan fell apart the moment McLaurin stepped onto the field. It's the kind of performance that makes coaches scratch their heads in disbelief. Yet for those paying close attention, it felt inevitable, almost scripted by destiny itself. Fans on social media began to notice the pattern early on. It wasn't just the yards, the catches, or even the spectacular jukes and pivots, though those were, of course, jaw-dropping. It was the way McLaurin controlled the flow of the game, dictating pace and rhythm in a manner that suggested he wasn't merely playing, he was teaching. Observers started using words like lesson and humiliation cautiously at first, unsure if the narrative was being exaggerated by excitement, but the numbers, the highlights, the eye test, it all spoke in one voice. McLaurin wasn't just beating defenders. He was making the Dolphins' coverage schemes look antiquated, slow, and disjointed. Analysts began speculating that this wasn't simply a physical dominance, it was a psychological blow, a statement sent across the field with every precise cut, every perfectly timed route, and every acrobatic grab that left defenders flailing in his wake. There's a story circulating that even teammates were caught off guard. Some reportedly joked that McLaurin was on another level tonight, a version of himself that had seemingly anticipated every move before it happened. Rumors suggest that in the huddle, his confidence was palpable, bordering on theatrical. He allegedly made subtle gestures, subtle nods, and sly smirks after key plays. And teammates couldn't help but notice that his energy seemed to seep into the rest of the team, raising morale while simultaneously dismantling the confidence of the opposing side. For Miami, what was meant to be a routine defensive strategy turned into a frantic scramble to adjust, with little to no success. The murmurs in post-game discussions suggested that McLaurin had forced them into mistakes, had baited them into decisions that felt like traps, and had done it all while maintaining a composed, almost casual demeanor that only amplified the impression of domination. The social media sphere exploded in response. Clips of his runs, sideline grabs, and perfectly timed touchdowns or near touchdowns began circulating almost immediately. Memes, reaction videos, and countless comment threads debated the level of humiliation inflicted. Was it a fluke? Was it intentional? Some analysts argued that McLaurin's performance could serve as a blueprint for wide receivers for the rest of the season, a study in route precision, timing, and field awareness. Others speculated that it might be a turning point in his career, a game that cements his status not just as a talented player, but as a master of mental and physical chess on the field. Rumors of comparisons to legendary moments in league history began cropping up. Players like Calvin Johnson, Randy Moss, and Jerry Rice were thrown into conversations as fans tried to find an adequate frame of reference. Yet there's a sense that McLaurin, at least on this night, carved out a moment that felt entirely his own. The aftermath is still unfolding, but insiders hint at a flurry of post-game interactions that underline the narrative. Dolphins players reportedly expressed both frustration and admiration behind closed doors. There's talk that some defensive backs, usually poised and stoic, admitted feeling embarrassed, not just by the physicality of McLaurin's plays, but by the clarity with which he exposed coverage lapses. Coaches, too, are said to have revisited game tape immediately, searching for ways to prevent a recurrence. While commentators dissected every second, every nuance of McLaurin's movements, rumors suggest that scouts from multiple franchises were watching intently, perhaps taking notes on the chemistry between him and his quarterback, on the subtle ways he creates separation, and on how he seems to anticipate defensive behavior in real time. Meanwhile, the fans are loving it. There's an almost mythic quality to the storytelling that surrounds McLaurin now. Casual observers, those who tuned in expecting a standard contest, are suddenly obsessed with the idea of a single player delivering what amounts to a masterclass in offensive football. Chat rooms, podcasts, and YouTube comment sections are brimming with speculation about what this performance says about his trajectory, his mindset, and even his future with the team. Could this be the game that propels him into MVP conversations? Could this be the night that cements him as the league's preeminent wide receiver? Not just in statistics, but in influence, aura, and intimidation factor. The buzz suggests that the implications are massive. And even those not normally tuned into league intricacies are suddenly analyzing every motion, every pivot, every foot placement. As the story spreads, the narrative takes on a life of its own. It's no longer just about the game, it's about legacy, style, and the subtle but devastating ways a player can dominate without ever raising a hand in anger. Without trash talking, without theatrics, McLaurin, according to every whisper and rumor, achieved something rare. He humiliated a team while simultaneously elevating the sport, creating a spectacle that felt both inevitable and shocking. Some insiders suggest this is the kind of performance that will be referenced in highlight reels for years to come. The kind of night that younger players study obsessively. The kind of dominance that inspires both awe and fear. There's even talk that his approach could influence offensive strategies league-wide, as coaches and coordinators scramble to replicate or defend against the kind of precision, anticipation, and field awareness he demonstrated in the end. What makes this story so compelling is the duality. McLaurin didn't just excel, he taught. He didn't just score, he instructed. Every movement was a lesson in timing. Every dodge an exhibition in strategy. Every reception a subtle rebuke to the assumptions the Dolphins brought into the matchup. It's the kind of performance that blurs the line between player and maestro, between athlete and tactician. And the rumors swirling suggest that the entire league has taken notice. Whether this will go down in history as the game where McLaurin humiliated the Dolphins or the night he gave an unforgettable masterclass in football. One thing is clear, the whispers aren't fading, they're growing louder, more insistent, as fans, players, and analysts continue to dissect, debate, and replay every electrifying moment. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Terry McLaurin stands tall, the orchestrator of a game that might just be remembered as one of the most remarkable performances in recent memory. A night where skill, intelligence, and audacity combined to leave an indelible mark on the NFL landscape. Thanks for tuning into District Command Central. Make sure to subscribe and follow us for all the Commanders news you need. Until next time, keep the faith and hail to the Commanders.